Should we move on to Land Ensemble? Very ambitious, in quotes, concept album. Different people have had different experiences, judging from the but I think everyone sort of kind of agrees that the actual writing of it, that stage, was very tough. It's really quite hard. There were all these different things going on. Maybe just start with, why did you decide to do something that was so ambitious at that point? Was it just, you felt, okay, this guy's in it?
Why double? I can't remember why double. Was it right?
I think we just thought we could get away with it, and we wanted to do it. Like the idea of a double album, concept album. In those days, concept album wasn't a dirty word, and we were a logical group to do it. We'd had suppers ready. It was virtually half a side of an album. And it just seemed a logical way to go, I suppose. So we wanted to do that. All the sort of obviously produced its own problems that in the end, but it was an ambitious idea, and I don't think in a sense there was anything wrong with that.
Was it the idea of a concept album that came first? You thought, right, we want a concept album. What's the concept?
I remember it was about a third of the way through the process at Headley. We started sitting around and talking about concept, and I think, I started with the rail idea at that point, and I was also conscious that, it was, I think it was pre-punk at that point, but there did seem to be something in the air that, I felt very strongly, didn't want it just to be this sort of fanciful, folky, pretty countryside thing. So there was this thing which was clearly West Side Story influenced, of trying to get a sort of urban setting. So the sort of Pilgrim's Progress aspect of the story, which I would accept is quite impenetrable in places, was intended to be begun in New York with a Puerto Rican hero. So, but I think there were two other sort of ideas around then of what we might tie all the stuff together with, and I think one might have been yours. I can't remember. I don't think they were all mine, but I think I won the day with this story as a starting point. But it was a contentious issue, with the lyrics, and there was sort of insistence that everyone would be involved in some lyric writing along the line. And I mean, it was all beginning to go wrong. I was Headley and then the Welsh bit, and Anna, my firstborn, was we thought we were going to lose her, and then there was stuff then, and I was torn there, just wanting to be dad and family, and then I had this offer from William Friedkin to be an ideas person, not a sort of writer or a musician, in a sort of new Hollywood that he was trying to create with different people, and it was very exciting for me as a big film fan, and I thought that there ought to be a way that I could do that and the band, but the band were absolutely clear that I was either in the band or out of it. So there were all these type of tensions that were going on parallel, with trying to work together. And so sometimes I would be buried away on my own in a room while these guys were at the other end of the house working through some of the instrumental things, and then putting together some songs that we eventually found a way to stick it all together. But I think
I remember being some of the enforced separation being because one person was was now responsible for something that probably, the lyrics, you know, which would have been maybe split. I mean, I think probably between these three guys than Steve or myself, and then we were starting to run late because of various things, because of relying on one person for lyrics. And I think I have very strong memories of you being in the piano room.
Yeah.
And us being thrashing around, writing some of the music, which would eventually have the lyrics, you know.
I think we underestimated, of course, double album is...
Yeah.
And the body of work required was quite a lot, instrumentally and lyrically too, so it was a sort of a time issue as well, in a way, I think.
I mean, was it... I don't remember... it wasn't necessarily a decision to make a double album, was it? Or was it just like the amount of space one needed to tell the story, such as it was?
No, I think it was. That's why all the jams happened, because we thought we got space.
Okay.
To put some of the sort of jams in between. I remember it that way, I think.
And the thing about him, you know, not having time off, you've got to look back at how we were at that time. You know, we were sort of just about making it, just about hanging on in there. I think we'd taken sort of a few months off, and none of the rest of us really wanted to do that. Obviously, it would have been very tough. I'm not saying it wouldn't have been the right thing to do, but it wasn't something. And then the couple with this sort of lyric thing where, you know, we felt that because it was just one person writing pretty much all the lyrics, it's a certain character, you know, that came across with the lyrics on that, which is, you know, I think works fine. But it is a different thing to what we'd had in the past with the contrasting lyrics written by everybody else.
I think the story didn't just quite hang together, but the atmosphere of the album, some of the individual tracks in there are fantastic. Sort of change of mood. I think the American setting perhaps, but you know, something like Fly on the Windshield is kind of getting into something quite rock, less prog rock. I mean, it would seen now to be, you know, as current perhaps as it was then.
Yeah, Fly on a Windshield, I think, was one of my favourite moments too on that record. And I think
it's actually, I mean, the Headley Grange is where Zeppelin did a lot of that, I mean, When the Levee Breaks and stuff. I mean, and I think that track actually, and I'd never thought about it before, but actually has a lot of Zeppelin in it. I mean, it was kind of very, very dark and CinemaScope, you know, Technicolor, you know.
But you kind of forget, you know, we look back all about, you know, you had issues and stuff and with double album, but you kind of forget too, the stories we talk about, but actually some of the writing, you know, it's some great moments, you know what I mean, in that front room.
Yeah, no, I think there were some moments, but whereas Supper's Ready had sort of fallen together in a fairly friendly and easy way, but that was quite natural. Everything about this period was sort of dark, tormented, and, you know, difficult. But there were still highlights, and I think we knew there was some good musical moments there, but it was.
I think it was very different, you know, because you've got that sort of cottage mentality that goes with being kids practically, and suddenly, you know, you're all having children, and there's pressures and there's other things, and I think, you know, we knew Pete was probably going to leave. One minute he was in the band, then he wasn't, then he was back, and with all the touring, and we knew he was going to fulfill the commitments. But I, for one, never wanted to say goodbye to him, and I thought he couldn't possibly, you know, fulfill those commitments, and that would just be it. You know, it just seemed so central to the plot.
You're living in the same house. You're living all the time under the same roof every day, which increases pressure.
When there is, as you were saying, I mean, I was married and Jolie was a youngster. You were having Anna, you know, so it was kind of an awkward time to be living under that one roof, probably. But you don't think about that at the time. I mean, you're just presented with where you are and what you're doing.
And once again, a bit like when Ed, I feel we never discussed options. If it was the right move anyway, but you know, it was going to happen. But we never discussed, do we? We never sat down and sort of said, okay.
I had a long conversation with Peter, but
You had a conversation.
I know, it was probably like...
You know where you're out.
No,
This is the William Friedkin moment.
Well, this was well after. This was well after, probably after the tour. Even I don't know. You know, because it was. I don't know. It was something you want to hang on to something, and we had something together. You know, we experienced quite a few years together of musical sort of combination, particularly he and I, which I didn't really quite want to lose. You know.
You've been a solo artist. Correct me if I'm wrong. Ever since, I mean,
well, I had 2 years because I just wanted out of the music business after that. When I was determined not to come back in, but then I started looking about at alternatives and couldn't find anything else that would pay the bills quite as well.
But do you think that, in a sense, that was it that you found it impossible to write with? It's like writing with a committee.
Well, and I think the other thing worth saying is that this was the time when Phil and Steve had sort of come of age, you know, whereas the album previously, we'd still been able to bully our way around a bit. And this time, you know, they were equal voices. The more Tony wanted to sort of control, because I felt, you know, with this freaking opportunity, Phil always seemed to be pitching off and working with other things and doing other things, but, you know, that rule didn't seem to apply to me. And so there was that sort of type of thinking going on. And, you know, I knew and loved, you know, the writing together, and I knew that Tony and I had written some great stuff and worked well together, but it was all getting more difficult. And I think, you know, as the tensions built, people were hanging on tighter and making the rules tighter, and so the urge to break out. And then with the personal stuff, when for me there was very little sympathy and support when, you know, I was seriously facing losing a child, that I think was the icing on the cake that sort of closed the door.
I have to say that I didn't, you know, I mean, I didn't know. I mean,
I wasn't aware of it either. I had my own problems because my marriage had broken up.
No, you know.
Yeah,
so it was terrible. But real terrible.
Yeah.
We're either bad talkers or bad listeners.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we kind of thought of it as being that much in the forefront. Yes, we were certainly, well, that's part of our upbringing. I think it doesn't help. But I think, just coming back to the writing thing, you've got 5 people writing in a group, and you've got a record coming out maybe once a year or something. There just wasn't enough space. You know, it's a tiny amount of music. So it had to shed somebody, and Peter was the obvious person to go because he had a career he could go to. None of the rest of us would have had a chance, you know. And even as a 4-piece, we weren't sure we had a chance.
Otherwise, he would have left.
But at the time, what was weird is that, you know, and I think Tony played a role there, just persuading me that we needed to tour and give the band a chance. Because although I think it seemed more likely that the band would succeed to me than it did to the rest of the guys, because, you know, I felt this was a group of songwriters, and always group of songwriters can carry on writing. So, but because I was a very visible front man, you know, I agreed to do this extra 6 months touring, and I said, well, maybe we started out, I think it was Cleveland. I mean, Tony was the first person that I talked to and sort of said, no, I can't do this, I'm definitely going to have to leave. And that's when you asked if I would carry on, and then we talked the next day, I think, with everybody, and I agreed to do this European tour to buy some more time for the band. But I felt that I was betraying our fans at that point, because I couldn't be who I was and I couldn't say that I was leaving. And we ended up in this really sad gig in France, which was a very small audience. And instead of going out with a bang, it sort of was a,
well, we actually cancelled the very last gig, Toulouse, due to lack of interest. And with the previous one, with the Sanson, we played, as Pete said, a tiny audience. And it was just a real damp squiv of a gig, you know, memorable only because my roadie decided to appear on stage naked as Pete's double on particular point of the thing. That
happened in Vancouver.
That was another occasion.
You see,
that was with the banana.
In front of
Vancouver
Phil's.
was Jeff behind you naked.
I thought it was the girls in Vancouver.
No,
Seattle, was
because
it?
my mother-in-law
his
was in the
No, it
audience.
was.
My mother was in, my mother-in-law was
Well,
in the
it definitely had a sound source.
Free strip.
well, maybe it's
Couldn't stop him.
Yeah.
Couldn't stop him.
But we should explain. We should explain there was a point in the Lamb where rail sort of splits, and we do that on stage. So I would be in the rail outfit, and then there was a dummy on the other side in exactly the same outfit. And you know, the lighting, there wasn't a lot of lighting, but explode, and so you wouldn't know
Which was which?
Yeah, a few jokes about the spot,
the dummy.
which is the dummy. But of course, for the crew, this as we approach the end of things, first of all, the jeans would be have the flies undone with a banana hanging out, and then gradually they would have more and more fun till.
No, that was you, Pete.
Yeah. So, yeah.
It was Jeff Banks in Vancouver. I remember that, but maybe it happened in Besançon as well. I can
Remember the last show being, it was kind of weird. The final show cancelled. The last night was a real letdown, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, we didn't.
From the moment that Peter said he was leaving, it would have been quite a difficult tour anyhow, because we played half the shows to an audience that had never heard the music before. We're playing, 2 hours worth of music or something to an audience that never heard it and really just wanted to hear the knife in the musical box. And we didn't really sort of, at the final end, we did actually give them the musical box, so that was about it, really. It was not satisfying, and we had a very complicated show, which never worked properly. Lots of slides and things would be there. I just remember it being a sort of...
It was a funny for you, Joe. Hard for you, obviously, because you knew. Hard for us, too, because you're sort of one of the guys who you've been so in the same space with, wanted to move on, and you're sort of feeling it, can't quite enjoy it so much, you know what I mean? Because it doesn't feel quite the same energy.
But didn't you really feel it was the hype for the band? By contrast, you felt this was actually...
Well, I don't know. I think there was parts of the Lamb, that were as good as we got up to then, and but I felt, that could engage like Supper's Ready had engaged, or Watchers or Musical Box. But...
And isn't it supposed to be the favourite progressive album of all time, according to the readers of
it's
publications? So with hindsight, it's all different, isn't it?
We're coloured by how we felt.
Our problems, other people's classics.
We would all... I think we'd also really like the album. I don't think it's just, you would say it's flawed. Definitely. I think that particularly the fourth side is where it really goes wrong for me. Well, third and fourth sides, it's just sort of... It doesn't really deliver, and, to me. Whereas side 2 is great. I think it's the best side, really. And that would have been, perhaps, as a lot of people said at the time, made a great single album, but everyone would have made a different single album out of the tracks on it.
And I remember trying to find a finish because, with Supper's Ready, it had that thing, and you got the New Jerusalem and blah, 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 and the emotional pitch had gone up to the top level. And with it, I think we tried a few ideas to end it and hadn't really found something that really nailed it emotionally in the same way that we...
Remember, we were mixing, we were 24 hours a day, I think, at that point. I have a memory, my camera kind of went off when we were mixing it.
Yeah.
Finishing. I remember being in the studio when you were recording the vocal.
We're doing it in shifts.
And doing it in shifts, yeah. And I remember we were up all night.
Yeah.
And then you guys came in and sort of said, you got to be joking or something. Because we were trying to
Where's the guitar? That's what I said, it's a guitar.
It's based on the
Strum
guitar.
guitars. Thinking I came in and there was no guitar on the song. I said, where's the guitar?
Yeah.
So, that's a lesson for us, really. We'd never been very good at working, into the night and for a long, long time and stuff. And that was definitely something.
Taking the show on the road before the record had come out, did that confuse audiences?
Say the least, it wasn't the plan, obviously.
Yeah, anyone who's toured knows that the audience want what they know and are familiar with, and they never want the new material. So every artist has this sort of battle, but we were sort of arrogant enough to think that we were going to do it anyway, and there was going to be this huge amount of unfamiliar stuff that was really quite demanding for an audience. And although it may have been voted favorite album and so on nowadays, at the time when we first presented, it was just a bunch of weird, unfamiliar material. That's how the fans, I don't think, it wasn't something that instantly brought the house down.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it divided audiences, though, didn't it? You remember fights breaking out with, or maybe I've got the wrong era here. I'm thinking of
nothing to do with
Of the fire story.
I mean, I think considering it's a double album, it didn't do too bad. I mean, the shows are okay, you know what I mean? You're asking them a lot, you know.
And then, of course, we were touring it for so long, for about 9 months. So, you know, after a certain amount of time, you know, the audience had absorbed it and taken it to their heart.
and there's some good shows, you know, in there, I suppose. We having to play every track on the album, which we'd never done before. We used to have certain things we knew wouldn't really work live, particularly if things were based on acoustic piano, because we didn't have an acoustic piano on stage and had just electric piano that had no feel. So things like, particularly the Lamia and Anyway and things, I think just didn't make it on stage at all.
You also had this great and strange costumes and props.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of helped us. That probably helped us through.
Hold the attention.
From the audience point of view, you know what's happening. I'm not sure. It's a lot of strange stuff. Oh, but there's Pete coming through a giant cock. This is going to, you know, it's.
Yeah, and I think Phil was getting more and more pissed off with my sort of crazier concoction.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, when you're talking to this is the first time we've all been together talking like this, and since we're all together talking, which is, you know, like 40 years ago maybe. But I mean, one tends to, when you're doing interviews, you make things simple. For the journalist or the interviewer, you know. And
You're saying all journalists are simple? Can I quote you?
no, but you kind of oversimplify the situation. And I find myself reading and talking about the fact that I was getting a little bit miffed, that the attention was going more towards the visual side of it. Whereas I never, you know, I mean, that's because you've got to sort of make a point because the guy's going to move on to the next solo album or questions, you know. It's kind of difficult. It's more difficult than that, and it's more complicated than that. I did find, as I think probably maybe we all did, or maybe, you know, 4 of us, the other 4 of us did, the record company would come in and go straight to Pete and say, "Great show, Pete," you know. And being a musician, I that my only glory was from the playing, because I wasn't writing. You know, I barely, you know, I was influencing maybe some of the arranging on songs, on The Lamb and some of the other stuff, but I wasn't writing. So that was my particular kind of, you know, but all that's being maybe ignored, you know. So, but it was never really a big thing, you know, I guess. You know, in case
You're down in stone now, Peter, the one who didn't like it. I mean,
I know, that's it. You know, and in fact, you know, and then of course I became the singer, which means that I was.
That's karma for you.
Yeah. Then I was kind of subplotting. There was a little plot there, way back, for me to get rid of the singer. You know, because I was jealous. You know, it gets out of control. You know, and the truth is far from that. I was, you know. I never wanted to give up the drumming stool. I never did. And I only did so because, you know, we couldn't find a singer. But if I could have rewritten the story, Pete would still have been in the band and I would have stayed on the drums and the world would never have heard of Phil Collins as a solo artist. But
however, there were times though when Phil and I used to. Whenever there was a dressing room with a piano, Phil and I would be in there, both playing around on our own songs.
Yeah.
I remember that well.
So was it the point? I think Mike says this in the book. So
it's true.
It's all lies.
It's true.
Before it's an opinion you expressed. Before Lamb, the costumes kind of tied in much more directly with the sort of using the characters in the songs. But with Lamb, it gets kind of there's a shift. And there's all kinds of costumes that you can't quite make sense.
It ties in, but it became something else. You know what I mean? Funny thing is, you know, I think if Pete hadn't left and we carried on, we'd have sort of changed too. You know what I mean? I don't think we'd have carried on that road. I don't think, unless you had plans you hadn't told us. No, you know, it would have been a natural thing.
By that stage, we were all, I mean, speaking for myself and I think Mike as well, we were getting quite into the visuals ourselves. It wasn't like this is something that Pete was imposing on us at all. I mean, the idea of the slides, I've always loved the idea of trying to put us in an environment. That's what I thought. So I loved the beginning with the New York skyline that just slowly sort of got brighter. It meant that we were playing in New York, and that seemed fantastic. And I love that kind of effect. So, I was all in favour of the sort of that aspect of it. I just think sometimes we went a bit over the top. But as a show, I think if it had worked perfectly, it was very ambitious and in the main was worth it. My criticisms of it are much more down to the fact that I never felt it kind of musically sort of kind of worked both at the beginning and at the end quite as well as it should have done. Fantastic songs on it, and some great lyrics on it too. Just put that in, just brush them up a bit.
Too late.
It's a bit late for an edit.
Yeah.